Hi, good afternoon.
Hi guys.
Hi Craig, how's it going?
Yeah, good yourself?
Good, thanks.
Hey, cool. Thanks for making it. I'm sure people are going to start to come in piecemeal throughout the session. So I'll just keep admitting them as they come. So yeah, thanks guys for joining. I'm just going to bring up the Miro board. I sent out a link just a minute ago for the Miro board. Denard's going to send it in the chat any second now as well. So if you guys can jump in there, that would be really cool, and we can start going through the agenda. So you're all here because obviously you've got some interest in visualization and visualization of complex information. So just the agenda for today. So we'll go through the intros and in a second and just go through what is visualization. And then we're going to go through talking about when to use it, when not to use it. We're going to go through the types of visualization that are available out in there, and we're going to workshop that a little bit. And then we're going to talk about some principles of how to decide when to visualize and what to visualize, and then how to do it after that. Then we'll go into some breakouts and have a little bit of an activity to talk through some different ideas with what you've learnt and the principles we've learnt and how to apply them. Then I'm going to get you guys to come back and present back to the rest of the crew. Yep, a couple more people coming in. Just 1 second. Just admit them. And then we'll have a bit of a debrief. So we'll go into Prezzo mode. So yeah, so what is visualization? So as it says on the slide here, visualization is a technique or any technique for creating images, diagrams, physical objects, or animations to communicate a message. So you see over on the side here, there's kind of a different range of visualizations that you'll see out in the world. So things like infographics, mind maps, you'll see metaphors, so using other problems, other types of solutions to articulate a problem that you've got, or even things like prototypes. Visualization is a useful tool for the consumer of information because it allows you to transcend the written or spoken language. So more and more we are sitting on Slack, we're chit-chatting away, we're having video calls, and we're trying to explain things and we articulate them, but we're ignoring the other parts of language that you can articulate. So body language is great, so video is enhancing it, but using visuals allows you to transcend that and to branch out into more of the language receptors within your brain. And which moves me on to the ease of processing. So images, as they say, images speak a million words. Jim, I don't know how you're able to move bits on my slide, but I think you'll all agree that images are really way easier to sort of articulate a problem or articulate a concept in a very quick way. Now, we all know these things, I believe, but some of the things we overlook, and I want you to sort of think around, is why visualization is important for the creator of a visualization. Now, again, we're in a busy world. Visualizing stuff tends to be on the back burner, in the back pocket, something that we don't get a chance to do. And we get busy, we get into our rhythms of explaining things through text or through voice or through a video call, and we don't think through things on how they can visualize. But I want you to challenge yourself and think about when you go to visualize something, it actually forces the critical thinking process of how you would put it down on paper, which brings out a whole bunch of other different insights and innovations in the process of going through that thinking. And it also lends a different perspective to the information, which you may not have uncovered if you were to just articulate it through voice or text. And this is from your own perspective, but also from the perspectives of others as well, right? getting into the workshop component of this before we go into some different ways of visualization, I want you guys to jump into the Miro board now and potentially mess up this board here and start writing down some of the times when in your job or in your work you should visualize, when you should be doing more of the visualizations, and when visualization does not work. So, okay, I'll give you guys a couple of minutes to do this. And if anyone's struggling to get into Miro, chuck it into the comments on Zoom and we'll put them up into the slides on Miro. A few more people coming in. If you can give us a little bit of an idea around when you think it is, not just at a high level, kind of go into some details about those. And then once you've done that, I want you to, if you see any others in there that you like, chuck a label on it with your name as a vote. How long do we have for this one, Nenad? You're on mute.
Sorry, we have another 2.5 minutes as the Miro board timer suggests, but we could spare a couple more minutes if need be.
Awesome. So guys, if you want to vote on others, you can either use a little label thing or I've put a little sticker over on the side here where you can just take one of those and shove them on the other tickets that you see out there. I want to get an idea of when is the best time to be visualizing information, complex information, when is not a good time to be visualizing complex information. Thanks, Craig, for putting that back. I'm going to vote on my own one over here. Okay, some of them put a little relationships, that's a good one. So I'll start reading through some of these. So I put my own one as when you're doing a Zoom call or in a workshop, when you've got multiple people that you need to quickly across information pretty quickly, I think that's a really good time to be visualizing things. When you're aligning on conceptual ideas and approaches, so I'm assuming by this I mean conceptual as in it's not real, it's not tangible. Visualization allows you to jump into those concepts. But showing the form, the product, example, drawing and sketches. Yep, that's a really good one. Again, it's kind of in the conceptual realm. Showing growth or changes over a period of time. Yeah, so again, it's not of the physical realm, right? Getting stakeholder buy-in and complex things that need a picture to convey a story. Cool. Okay, looking a little bit lean on the side over here. Got distrusting audience. So when there's an audience that don't trust you, that's interesting. So if an audience doesn't trust you, you don't believe that visualization is the right thing. I'd like to dig into that if anyone who put that in. If you'd like to drop a message into the chat and tell us why you put that one down, that'd be really nice to know.
Yeah, it was Craig that did that one. I'll put a comment. It was really just that, you know, sometimes, you know, marketing as a function is described as like the coloring in department. And it's that kind of, you're trying to hide facts, or, you know, it's that kind of, if there's a lack of trust, that might not be, it'll be sort of seen as trickery.
Yep. So there's kind of the seen as trickery, I'm going to say. Trickery. And there's a kind of that's linked to the stakeholders as well, when there's senior stakeholders. So I put that one. When there are senior stakeholders where there is potentially that distrusting audience, or there's seen as trickery. When some words might be better, definitely. I think there's a great value in knowing that sometimes a word is actually more powerful because it's more detailed, it's more specific to what you're trying to relay. Someone's put, great picture should always work. That's contradictory to that. I love it. Cool. All right, so that was just a bit of a breakout session to talk about when we should use visualization. I'm kind of hearing, realistically, it's around complexity, conveying concepts, talking to many people at one time. When not to do it, I'm kind of getting the feel that it's around knowing your audience and knowing exactly the message that you need to relay are the types of times when you shouldn't use visualization. Cool. So I want you guys now to move over to the next slide. Thanks, Jim, for putting that back where it should go. Now, we've spoken through some of the types of visualizations so far. I wrote down like a paper, I'm going to write down like paper prototype. I want you guys to put down some of the types of visualization that you've come across, and then we're going to go through and talk about the types of visualization across the scale that I'll explain after you put them down. So give you a couple of minutes to put down different types of visualization, and I've got a few more hints that I'll keep bringing out as we go along. Cool, a few more people have just joined. Anyone who has joined, there is a Miro board link in the chat. If you want to jump into the Miro board link, we're on the type slide. Right now, we're just putting down the different types of visualization, and then we're going to discuss a linear, the relation between these types of different types of visualizations before we go into the next slide around how to get to visualization when you're dealing with a complex idea. So I'm going to start exposing a few more ideas that I had down here. So frameworks is one visualization type. So when you're talking about someone talking about a concept, they might have a framework around how something should work. Prototypes. Metaphors. So we saw before someone using a tree, a picture of a tree as a metaphor to talk about the above ground and the below ground. Another one I've got is storyboards. So talking about putting something down visual that talks about a storyline, and that storyline as a single board, so you can see where an idea started and where it went to, but articulated in a human form. Start going through some of the other ones we got here. So we've got the mind maps. Yep. Conceptual diagrams. Great. New York City subway map. I like that. It's similar to a metaphor.
Oh, hang on. Are you?
Oh, did you mute yourself?
No, I did. Sorry.
No, there's no wrong answers here, Jacinta. Chuck anything in. Cool. Cool. So I've uncovered a few more here that I've got. So doing things like fake apps, just to explain that very bluntly, similar to a prototype, but prototype being something that could be more physical, like a physical prototype. Let's talk about like paper prototypes or fake apps so people can conceptualize the whole idea. Journey maps, similar to storyboards, we're talking about a journey overall. Canvases. Now, talking about the concept behind a concept, similar to a framework, you've got these canvases that you see out there, like the business model canvas or lean canvas or value proposition. And there are millions of those canvases out there, the visualization, paper prototypes, a brain dump playback. So just taking a whole bunch of post-it notes and putting them back to someone with grouping. Data visualization, and then you can go into a whole range of other things around data visualization. Cool. So very quickly now, I want you guys to have a bit of a fight here around all of these post-it notes and group them along the line between the types of visualization tools that you put down, and have a think about, are they more data and fact-based, as in, are they looking back and articulating the existing data, or are they more conceptual and creative-based? And I just want to see where this lands, and just put them in proportion to each other. Cool, get that out, maybe 30 seconds. This is messing with my head. I love it.
Zeke, I love the Thunderdome aspect of what you're doing here. This is amazing.
Thank you.
Now, if my iPad just went magically grab one thing to mess you up every time, I apologize.
All right, cool. All right, so we sort of got a grouping, right? And you'll see here that there is no one type of visualization. You know, visualizations come from being sort of articulating data and fact-based stuff through to talking about the conceptual. But if we can agree that visualization is a fantastic tool for us to use to articulate a lot of different conceptual ideas, and also get across and convey messages, but then even make us think about and analyze a problem even more. What I want to talk about now is different ways that we can think about a problem as a precursor to deciding the best way to visualize things. And so I'll go into this slide here, which is the getting started with conceptual and creative tools. And so all of that was to try and show you that, you know, visualization is something that we kind of put down to, we don't have time, or it's too hard, or we don't know if the stakeholder is going to do it. But there are some ways to help you really quickly get to a point of knowing what visualization you want to do, how to put that visualization down, and how to tender it to your audience. Now, the first principle or the first concept to think about is systems thinking, right? So when we take a problem, if we look at that problem from the lens of that problem or that object or that idea or that thing exists within many systems and subsystems, we can then start to say, well, what are the impacts that this is having on those systems? And we can mentally start to build an image of how that system or those subsystems are interrelating with each other. So how to apply system thinking to a problem or an idea that you might be wanting to articulate is straight out, first of all, talking about the system or systems that our problem or idea exists within, identifying the different related systems, and then finding ways to describe how the attributes of our thing interact and affect other systems. Now that's a very, you know, open-ended concept, and I would urge you guys to jump into the whole realm of systems thinking and learn a lot about this, so you can apply this naturally as to what you do. But if you look at some kind of concepts of how a system thinker or principles that a system thinker applies to really quickly look at relationships within a system, they apply these 6 main tools, if you want to, talking about how things are disconnected and how they might become interconnected. Are there disconnections or interconnections within those? Looking at the linear groupings of things, so like things like timelines, or cause and effect versus circular, where there is no simple line. Looking at the silos of information versus information that emerges as a result of something. Then looking at parts versus the wholes, and so this is like subsystems and systems. Analysis versus synthesis, so looking back versus looking forward. Isolation versus relationships. So you can kind of circumnavigate the whole process of looking at an idea or a problem and see if it fits within one of these realms, and see if any ideas pop up in your head by applying these tools. And then so you look at, like, a system thinker can very quickly look at articulating a problem, because they, by applying this thinking, and show an engine that you can still see is an engine, but you can see all of the components or parts within it, right? So have a look at system thinking, think about how you can apply that to your problem that you're trying to articulate. It's a big area to get into, but I definitely recommend learning a little bit more about how to apply system thinking to problem solving. Now, the other one that I'm slightly more fond of and well-versed in is the human-centered design, or the design thinking. Now, this is taking a problem that you have and taking a human-centered approach to both thinking about the problem, but also solving the problem. And this is because humans are super unpredictable, and we ourselves take in assumptions and everything we have into our solving problems, explaining them. And this is why text and voice quite often are not great ways to articulate a problem or a solution to that problem, because the other human on the other side of it is a different human, and they're unpredictable, they're not binary. So human-centered design takes a linear approach to how to address every problem, and becomes more of a natural idea on how to articulate a problem before you go into visualization. So really the steps to it is understanding and empathizing the users of the system, of what the problem is you're dealing with, and the users in the system of the people that you're trying to articulate the information to. So understanding enough about them. Defining the problems that the users of your information that you're going to convey to, defining what those problems are, putting them down on paper so you can look at those and critically analyze those. And then collectively ideating new ways to solve the problems, right? So if you've done those first 2 steps, then you can go to other people and gather data from them as to ways that they might solve that problem. Now, if you apply design thinking to visualization, you might come up with the one diagram to kill them all, which articulates your entire organizational strategy. Or you could spend years and years and years trying to explain to absolutely every stakeholder why it appeals to them, and never quite get there because the ball, because the organization keeps moving. So collectively, collaboration, after you put a problem down, defining the problem, then going through and ideating. Then you go into prototyping, and this is where you get in straight into visualization. So design thinking is inherently visual. So there's some of the creative tools to think about how to visualize. We've spoken about some different types of visualization that are out there, between the data and fact-based to the conceptual. We've spoken about when we should or should not visualize. And now I want to move us into a little activity as a breakout. So we've got probably enough here for 2 breakouts to go through the activity and say, using either a design thinking or a systems thinking approach to articulating in a visual way how to explain one of these ones here. So select one from the group of the ideas to articulate and the person you need to articulate them to, and put it down on paper or on Miro, and then come back as a group and present it to the other group to say, this is the process we went through to come up with a visualization, and this is what we visualized. So I put a little cheat sheet together, which takes all of that great information I just went through and turns it into some step-by-step questions. So first of all, looking at who needs to consume the information, what is the problem that they're trying to solve, what are the relevant systems in and around that, either the human systems or the technical systems or the philosophical systems, and who are the relevant people in this problem, and where are they in their journeys. And then using that information, allowing you to decide your visualization type, and then just putting a mock of it down on paper. Cool. So I'm going to set up 2 Zoom rooms now. And split you guys up. Okay. I can't set them up. Why can't I set them up now? Oh, that's why. Running from here. Uh-oh. Okay, due to technical difficulties, I'm not going to be able to split you guys into rooms. So let's just do this as a single group. Can I get somebody to nominate one of these options here to try and articulate in a visual way in our little work breakout? Choose a hard one, guys.
Blockchain.
Blockchain. All right, cool. So we're going to articulate blockchain to grandma. All right, so this is where I'm going to force you guys to all come off mute and start to have a conversation around answering these questions and putting them on some post-it notes and then talking about how you're going to visualize this. So Jim's taking the lead. So who's going to look at this information? It's obviously grandma. So what are the assumptions about how to best relay this information? So what do we assume about grandma and how she consumes information? So this is going back to the when not to use visualization and trying to overcome that as a challenge. You guys can take it an approach of talking about it before putting it on paper. That'd be better, and we get a conversation going, collaboration as opposed to. Cool, Jim. Can you talk us through why you think picture would be a better way?
Well, in my mind's eye, a bunch of words might get lost for the grandmas I've known in my life, whereas a picture that conveys the different notions of a ledger and transactions and the flow of who's going along with where things are going in that concept, to me, seems better than a bunch of words. I mean, as I'm just talking about the words, like, it's complicated, right? So I would think a simple visualization should convey the working piece parts of this thing.
Cool. And can you
I-
tell me oh, go shut up.
Zeke, I also wanted to say that we need to map out a journey as to about the knowledge, because we need to we can't start with blockchain because we need to start with the prerequisite first. So we need to map out all those points as to what should be our starting point uh, to make her understand where we are going, right? And then we have to cover everything bit by bit rather than going to directly blockchain concept.
Cool. So within the assumptions, what we assume that she doesn't know enough about the stuff before this.
Yeah, because like essentially everything is in the scope if you think about it.
Yep. Yes, Kurt, you're coming. Cool. So what are some of the things that you think she needs to know before she knows about blockchain?
So the assumption would be that she knows the old ways of doing things.
Mhm.
So we need to take her to the point where things have transformed. So basically we need to explain what internet is, right? That could be, I'm not sure if that should be the starting point, but I mean the communication and all that, right? So at least if I think about my grandma, she wouldn't know all these things because it's really hard for me to explain what I do to her. So yeah, that's a start.
So this is where I'll start to challenge you guys. So to be able to explain blockchain to grandma, does she need to know everything, or does she just need to know the concepts? What do we assume grandma's going to use this information for?
Yeah, I can go. Just we need to make her understand what's the benefit or what's the outcome of it. That that would then lead her a curiosity. So what is it?
Beautiful, Katan. That's awesome. Can you elaborate on a little bit more what you think the benefits or outcomes are for grandma?
There a lot. It's like a more secure, like than like any other kind of bookkeeping.
Yep.
And how accurate it can be, and there is very less chances of maybe corruption or going wrong with it, because that are a lot of the challenges that traditional things work. Like there can be like a lot of data entry issues, then retrieving of the correct data in time. So these are the challenges which are overcome by blockchain because of its complexity to enhance that kind of accuracy.
Again, like the thing called data, it can be really subjective. Like how do you explain that?
But do you need to? So here's another question for you guys. Like, if you're explaining blockchain to grandma, what do you assume you're explaining it to her for? Are we going to go with the we're assuming that we're going to explain it to her so she can use it, or are we trying to explain it to her to show off our skills? What do you want to go? What do you think grandma's like? Just put a line in the sand.
Yeah, I can go. This is just for like a trivia thing for her. It could be a trivia thing for her. But what's the current state going on around the world? Because she has like seen many phases of life and many technologies emerging. So
Yep.
yeah, I think it would be very interesting to tell her something which is very advanced in technology in a way which is more humorous as well as more informing.
Yep. So it's trivial. So that's good, right? Because grandma's has heard and seen a lot of technological advancements in her time. So this is potentially trivial for her to start with, right? So as opposed to going, hey, this is the most technologically advanced thing ever, put yourself in her shoes, she's like, that's what they said 20 years ago, you know, like, and it's come even further. Like, so,
yeah, like that.
that's really good, man. So that's putting yourself in her shoes, right? So there has to be a trivial, you know, like not taking it too seriously to be able to explain this to grandma. Okay, I like it.
Hey, Zeke, as the room has been talking, I put these 5 Post-it notes in the main gray area, right? A checkbook, ledger, a file cabinet, a safety deposit box, her favorite cookie recipe, and a credit card, right? In theory, these are all things she has played with or has hung out with. And I think they're metaphors for some of the concepts that are in blockchain land that I just couldn't help but put down as people were talking.
Yep. No, that's awesome, man. And so those are great ideas to get you started, right? So in terms of like explaining blockchain as a concept, now I'll challenge you guys to say, okay, here's what blockchain is, but now how do you say to grandma, how does grandma get started on blockchain? So you've got 2 problems to solve here, which is this is what blockchain is as a concept, and now try and explain to her how does she get onto it.
I can go. Means first I can find out what are her hobbies or what interests her, and in the same terminology, taking an analogy of that her field of interest, we can relate some kind of concepts to that.
Yep. Okay, so I'll be grandma right now. I want to ensure that my grandchildren and my grandchildren's grandchildren benefit from my inheritance to them. But I want to make sure that it's not given away or used on ridiculous things. And you've uncovered that because you've spoken to me. So is this relevant to me at all?
Yeah, because that's what will interest her, because she wants that her inheritance should be used in a good way. So how blockchain can do that, or what are the current blockchain methodologies which could lead to a secure pass on of the inheritance?
Yep. So
you know what I think, Zeke, my initial perspective, and I'm the one who wrote that, you know, this is doing my head in a bit, because actually just the motion of all this stuff is actually making it very difficult for me to even pay attention to it, to be quite candid with you. It's like you know, I've worn VR headsets. This is worse than wearing a VR headset and trying to stand up. It's just like really kind of over the top for me. But the thing that I'm running into is the lack of storyline.
Yep.
Okay. Because, you know, to use the what you're trying to paint out, from my understanding, is the huge distance between the concept of grandma, which you expect to be not really techie, not really of today, very doubtful of all this stuff, probably really scared, all those emotional things that basically say the word blockchain is the furthest thing on her mind. And you're trying to bring that idea into her head and make it not so scary anymore. And that it's like, oh, look, we can have a conversation about that. Right? Is that fair?
Yep.
So if that's the divide, then the first thing that has to be done is more conversational in nature. To me, it's all about, it's like in the world of sales, we use the model of attention, interest, evaluation, decision. Those are the 4 steps everyone has to go through. But that's sales, and is basically whether you buy a product or you buy an idea, you buy into somebody's description of something. It doesn't change. That's the same process the brain goes through. So the first problem is really attention. And as soon as you break that particular rule of breaking attention, everything else basically is a muddled mess. So the first thing to find out is, what does the audience really relate to in terms of getting and retaining attention? If you can't get that, everything else you can't even get to interest. You can't even get to evaluation of decision. You haven't earned that right. So to me, that first thing is to find out what will the likelihood of the audience, whether it be grandma or a bunch of business leaders or whoever the case might be, if you can't get their attention and make them, it's kind of like squirrel, like every dog's going to turn their head when you say squirrel, when they see a squirrel, right? That's attention. You got to get that squirrel effect and keep it there long enough to go, I'm going to earn the right to go to interest. Now I want to go chase the squirrel, right? Okay. You got to move to those next steps. So for me, yeah, like out of all of the things that are there, like I forget who it was saying that they put all these things on there. There's only one thing in there that I can see that would relate in the simplest form. It's just recipe. Everything else is too much.
Mm.
All the rest of it is 15 squirrels. I don't know where to look anymore.
Perfect.
Okay. Is that fair?
Yeah, great. So this is exactly the empathy based and thinking from her point of view kind of stuff that we need to go into before you even talk about visualizing something, right? Before you about trying to articulate a concept idea, exactly that. You need to empathize with grandma, understand her attention span, what she's going to likely pay attention to, get her attention, and then talk to her in that language. So yeah, exactly, Mark. Like, thank you very much. It's a good contribution.
Yeah.
So if you've got that, right? So what are some of the things that you would need to do if you were to try and visualize this to grandma? What's the first thing you would do before you even visualize blockchain?
Here's an example of what I would think about, and to use that one word of recipe is you might even want to flip it on its head if you want to create attention. One of the ways of creating attention is to create the opportunity for fear, because fear is twice as effective a motivator as opportunity. So you tell grandma, what if there were no more recipes and no more cookies? You can't feed the kids cookies anymore. What would that be like to you? I was like, oh my God, I can't handle my life anymore. This is like, that's what I care about. Okay. All right. So what if I give you a solution to be able to make sure that you always have that? Okay. Now I'm going to make sure you always have a recipe book available to you all the time, because they're all about to go away. And I know that for sure. Right. So suddenly you might have some attention, and I'm using, it's a silly example in some ways, but it's the concept of how do you do that, right? So it's like, now I've got the fear, I've got the attention. It's like, all right, so now you can start extrapolating the future into no pun intended, bite-sized chunks, right? Yeah. Let's make the cookie bite-sized chunks. You don't want to stuff the whole cookie in the face, because that ain't going to work either. Let's take it into a small piece. So what does grandma need to be able to see? She has to see that, well, let's just use the example to use blockchain is, imagine that a cookie can't be a cookie without flour, water, butter, and all these things. So I'm going to take the butter away and the butter's gone.
Mm-hmm.
How are you going to make a cookie now? Well, blockchain, it's kind of like the butter. All right. It's one of the most important ingredients to make sure that the two parts come together and actually stick and taste good. Right. Now we're so it's that super simple thing. And then you say, but you know, as well as I do, grandma, that, you sent the kids to school and they all learned something about chemistry, right? Well, what's butter? What really is butter? Like that thing in between that I told you, that's pretty complicated if you look at it from a chemistry point of view, right? But that's too complicated. But it's only complicated because we don't understand what it is. So let's break down butter. Now I'm going to break that down. So the earlier analogy that you had about the engine and the exploded view, mm-hmm. right, has more to do with the destination, that the car that was used to put the engine in, that took you there, was gone. And then you extrapolate that. You got to go right to the final pain point. And that to me comes more from telling the story. Does that help?
Yes, it does. So what I'm hearing there is, right, so you've gone, this is a metaphor where you tell a story through the evolution of a metaphor. So it's kind of taking two of those things, and that's the concept. That's the visualization that you've got. So we came up with a couple of different visualizations, which helped us move into the concept of a metaphor, but then also using a storyline of how that metaphor evolves, and then tagging certain things to that metaphor that you can go, okay, it's this, it's this, it's this, so that grandma gets the concept, may not remember all of the details, but can come back to you and go, tell me that story about the cookie again. Right? And how that,
that's right. That's
Yeah.
right. And you know what, in a similar manner, by using, like, because I'm looking at this tool and I'm trying to, extrapolate this also where I have used various visualization methodologies in the past for training. Because I think you've done a lot of training over the years. And usually what would end up happening is, head office sends you the new product that's going to be launched, and they send you all the stats and specs and stuff like that. And, every page, every slide has 15 bullet points on it. And you go, not happening, not showing that to anybody, because they're going to look at that and say, you could have just sent me the damn list, right? What are you standing in front of the room showing me or reading out bullet points to me for? Like, I can read. So if you want to really leverage that, it's that whole thing of, don't ever use any kind of visualization to replace the communication that the individual should actually be using that relates most effectively to the audience. If the visualization has too much content, then it's kind of like if a pictures are worth 1,000 words. And as you know, like one of the challenges, because with the kind of photography that I shoot, 360s, as you know, I'm shooting absolutely everything all the time. And in of themselves, if you were to look at a 360 photo, it's way too much information because it's everything, right?
Yep.
But now turn around, look in one direction, pinch and zoom and look at one thing. Now it's starting to make sense because you're looking at one thing. But as soon as you actually zoom out too far, it's like a photo of a store with all the goods in the store, and all you can tell is, yeah, they sell a lot of stuff. But then that's like a George Carlin joke saying you're talking about stuff, as opposed to getting back to the reality of what's the thing.
Mm-hmm. So bringing it back to this for a second, Mark, let's take your concept of the storyline as a visualization. Now, one of the things that you've just picked up on around visualization is that visualization doesn't necessarily need to be on paper. Visualization can be storytelling, right? Because you're making somebody else visualize a concept. You're making them understand and absorb that information in a way that they can bring into their brain. So you've just triggered into something that's very interesting about this whole concept of visualization, is that it's not just things you can see with your eyes, it's things that you can see in your mind's eye. And so you can use these tools. You may not even need to get to the point of putting it down on paper, but if you take a thought around how do I make someone visualize this information, they're going to be able to absorb it a lot faster. Oh, who's outside now? So Mark, can we dig into your concept a little bit more here around the blockchain for grandma to manage her long-term investments? How would you articulate this out a little bit further?
Well, I'm not even necessarily sure that I'm clear on as to why I'm explaining blockchain to grandma yet.
All right, so let's make up a concept. Grandma's getting old. She's got a lot of money that she wants to pass on to her grandchildren, and she wants to make sure that money is used for the right things, like education, like investing in their children's children. Mm-hmm. She wants to make sure that it's not used for the wrong things, like partying and etc. Right? So how would you explain blockchain in a metaphor and a storyline as to why she should use blockchain or ledger to manage her finances, to manage those decisions moving forward, as opposed to traditional systems like going through solicitors, going through banking institutions?
First thing that comes to my mind is picklings and jams.
Okay.
Okay.
Walk me through that.
So you know darn well that your recipe for making pickled beets, which happens to be a family favorite and an heirloom that everybody talks about, that once you're dead and gone, they're never going to be able to taste your pickles and jams again. So what are you going to do? You're going to make lots of it. And the fact that pickles and jams is a preserved product makes it so it lasts a real long time. What makes it so? That's something she's going to relate to, because she understands that basically adding vinegar and salt basically allows things to pickle and they'll last for like years and years and years and years. It was protecting it. Now I've actually got a storyline that she can relate to. So it would be as simple as saying, imagine doing pickled beets or pickled whatever and forgetting to put the salt in. Well, not using blockchain is like forgetting to put the salt in, because that's where the future is going.
Why? And so that's inevitably the first quote. Then first questions after that, right? Which is
Right.
That's the next part of the
Right.
story. Can you explain to me why?
Well, you would use, okay, so salt, it's a tangible thing. It has some weight, right? It used to be that, think of salt like being like gold in money in terms. Let's say salt was the same thing as gold. Once upon a time, all money was gold backed, right? Now we've got non-gold backed money. Nobody has gold in any banks.
Yep.
It's like having no salt to do pickling. That's a dangerous thing. But what happens if you were to use one of those stories, like, you know, what's the term for a magician or a Merlin that can turn anything into gold? You know, sort of the Merlin with the, okay.
Midas.
That's the one, the Midas. So
Midas.
you got the Midas touch, right?
Yeah.
Well, blockchain is kind of like the Midas touch, because what it does is it allows you to create virtual salt for as long as you need it.
Love this analogy. I love this metaphor. I love this storyline.
So now what you've actually got is something that she can really, because she knows what gold is. She's probably worn a gold wedding ring since she was in her 20s.
Yep.
You know, she understands that she's probably heard somewhere in the news that gold isn't in the banks anymore. And then you can get a little bit more complicated and explain how the gold is gone, because she'll probably say, where did the gold go? Right? Then you can say, well, I'm going to tell you a story about a car. That's not a car. It's called fiat. You've heard of a fiat car? Yeah, well, there's such a thing as called fiat money. You know, fiats, you don't see too many of those.
No.
Why? They're kind of like invisible, right? So you can actually bring that story in line and say that basically the banks have been basically selling you cars that don't exist, or fiat money that doesn't exist, for a long time. And eventually there's no way to know whether or not there really is anything to value in the bank. The bank's basically just an empty vault. So imagine if we were actually able to give you control over that vault. But the way that the control is done, because we know that the world has all gone digitals with ones and zeros. Well, those ones and zeros is actually the calculation that only you have control over. You know the formula. And even if you lose your mind, you get senile like everybody else does, doesn't matter. That's okay. The formula still works.
Yep. So you could break this out even further and say blockchain is the first part of it. The first part of the story is like the recipe for your pickles and jams, and you can use that analogy and that metaphor. But you could say that there's the special salt that you get is going out of production.
Yep, we mined it all out. It's gone.
Yeah. So exactly, we've mined it all out. It's gone. But blockchain is where that salt exists in perpetuity.
Mm-hmm.
And then Grandma says, but what about my recipes? How do I make sure that my grandchildren know how to cook my recipes?
There you go.
Well, there you go. So your recipes are safe and they're secure within the blockchain.
So the key here for me,
the key a single key to each of your individual grandchildren. They have the key to that blockchain. And now you understand that analogy. Now you can say to them that the value is the salt, which means that the value of money is reducing. You put that money into something that is growing, it becomes a future standard asset. And knowing that that money is going to be used for the right things and the right reasons, is using the blockchain and the ledger to write into that money what that money can and cannot be used for, which means the recipe that you put down is there in perpetuity.
How does that work for you?
I like it. That's a storyline, which we covered before. That's a metaphor. And there's an analogy in there as well. We haven't put anything down on paper, but we've successfully visualized explaining blockchain to grandma. Cool. That was great. Now, has anyone got any questions?
Yeah, means visualization in this sense, like we are all visualization in our mind. We can see the picture of the salt, the butter, and the Midas. We see that he's touching somewhere and turning into gold. So it's like automatically the story visualizing itself in our minds, even though we don't see any picture on the screen. So that's a great way. Yeah.
That's a very great insight.
Yeah.
Awesome. Has anyone else got any questions or feedback from that? Cool. No, nothing else? Okay, great. So that was excellent. Great insights that came out of that. Visualization, digging into a little bit more about what visualization is. Going back to what I said to start with, none of this can work without collaboration. None of this can work without empathy and getting into the mindset of the user and making mistakes, being vulnerable, coming up like this workshop was potentially going to go one way or the other, and I think we came to a really good solution. And that's because we use design thinking to design think this concept. And I hope you guys all learned something today. I know I've learned something. Yeah, and if you've got any more questions, let me know. Shoot through a message on LinkedIn or Facebook. And we'll send through the video shortly.
I had one thing.
Yeah.
Hello, I had one thing to ask. Like, so is storytelling an integral part of visualization? So that's what we come up with finally.
Yep, definitely. I think visualization. This whole concept was around let's uncover what visualization means, and I think that storytelling is inherently interrelated with visualization. You are telling a story through a visualization, and you need to tell the story that is going to suit the person you're telling the story to, in a way that they will understand, in a way that relates to them, and to Mark's very valid point, in a way that you can capture their imagination, capture their attention, and keep it for long enough that they will hear you through until the end of that story. So putting a graph up on a slide is one thing, but if there's not the before work, the after work, the storyline to pull it in, the visualization is just it's not really a visualization, it's just an image. So, yeah.
And just probably like adding on top of that, Zeke, started here a bit late. Me personally, I've been experimenting this a little bit at work as well. I used to use PowerPoint presentation to do a lot of those kind of presentation visual aids and everything. But lately, I've been using things like Miro or this different kind of, I guess you can say, alternative type of visualization, which is, I think, it's probably able to enable me to articulate my either idea or this sort of a storytelling message much more powerfully and clearly. And me personally, this is basically speaking from my real experience, right? In the last probably, I would say 3 to 6 months, I've been doing that. And I felt like it's been greatly received by the senior stakeholders. And they even said to other people, why can't we do it more? Like, because we always been using PowerPoints, having dotted points and everything. And like, I just, nobody told me to. I just tried it and it worked. And I just been keep doing it. And I felt it's great. Yeah.
Yeah, breaking the mold around these things and challenging the ways that people have been thinking. That's another great insight that comes out of this whole process around visualization. It's engaging communication in a different way and making others think in a different way and making ourselves think in another way. To take that to the next step, and I think we covered it before you came in, but collaboration on the story beforehand, that was why we were struggling just then, because we didn't have that upfront collaboration part to define what the problem was that we were solving. We fumbled through it until the point where we worked out what the problem was. And once we worked out what the problem was as a collaborative effort, the story just flowed, right? So I take yours to the next step now that you've sort of broached that concept of getting outside of the original tools, go back into, okay, let's talk about the storyline. Let's empathize with who the people we are trying to do this. Let's collaborate on this. Let's build this story together. Let's visualize it in our mind. And then once we come to visualization, actually putting it on paper, it's way easier. So yeah, I think that was one of the other insights we got out of today as well.
Agreed, yeah. And also just, I think for me, between PowerPoints and this type of tools like Miro, PowerPoints, a lot of times, it gives you limited capability for you to articulate like logic, the flows and logic, which tools like Miro. I mean, I know I'm getting a bit of like a technical conversation around like just between the tools, but I just think practically, I just felt like this is what I'm realizing the value right now. I'm telling everyone here, if you want to give it a try to work, it works really, really powerfully. Like I can't say how much powerful this stuff it is. And I just regret I haven't tried it earlier. So.
No, it's true. There is a lot of top-down sort of thinking in this space around creativity and lateral thinking that has been controlled by systems and tools within traditional management structures. And one of those is that the organization used to control the tools with which you used. And those tools limited the thinking that you could do because you needed to articulate your information within those tools. Now we're moving into this wider landscape. It's up to us to visualize, I guess, a different way that we can do things. But no one's going to tell us to do that because, the individuals themselves probably who haven't been exposed to this, they're not going to say, hey, go and use this other tool because they've never been exposed to it. They're not going to say, use this collaboration method because they've never been exposed to it. We need to tell the stories that will get them to think in the same way. And then you go into like the whole mindsets and everything like that. But visualizing this story, sharing it around, showing, hey, we just fumbled through a great workshop where we came up with some great insights around why visualization is something we look at and should look at and how to do visualization. Let them come up with their own version.
Agreed.
Cool. All right. So I might wrap it up there if there's no more questions or comments or feedback. No. All good?
Yeah, I agree with Zeke. So, sorry, Zeke, I'm late. I got the Women's Days event. I have to participate as a woman in data. So yeah. And actually want to thank you for your guidance through my journey for my startup. And basically, as like what you described today, the visualization of the product is actually the one that I did previously under your guidance. And it's very work. Obviously, we have to pivot to another idea because apparently, we're not telling the story correctly previously.
Yep.
And but I get the problem now because to visualize the data, the one that we have under the survey, and then the data, the one that actually under the formal data, the one that we get from different sector, for example, financial sector, something like that, is not matched. So I got a problem to visualize the story that related on that two information. So how am I be able to do it much better?
So take step one in this, which is who are you trying to visualize for, and what story are you trying to tell them? How much information do you need to tell them, and are there steps you need to take them on? Is it big bang? Do you need to tell them absolutely everything in the first go, or do you take a step back and understand who they are, understand the mindsets that they're in, the stories that they tell themselves, the systems that they relate to and exist in? And I think we missed that part with you. But then, articulating it in a way that they understand, but little bit by little bit. Because I think that visualization, this was a fine example of, and Mark nailed it, right? This is like, oh my God, this is crazy. And this is a great way to show that, hey, it's really hard to just go from go to woe, right? You need to take people on a journey. You need to take them on a story. So take a step back and look at what is the first problem you need to solve around articulating the information. Who are you trying to solve it for? What do they already know? And then look at the different visualization and storytelling methods that you can apply and see if one of them works. And then when you're doing that process, collaborate with somebody. Make sure that you're not doing that alone, because it's very easy to slip back into trying to explain information to yourself. And that's what I think that Kurt hit on with PowerPoint, is that you spend an enormous amount of time trying to make things pixel perfect and not enough time telling a story. And that's the thing you need to make sure, is that the story is told before you put pen on paper. So yeah, talk to your customers, talk to your users, talk to whoever it is you need to articulate that complex information to first. Understand them, understand where they're coming from, and it'll be a lot easier. It'll make it a lot easier.
So it's basically I need to scope the context of what the information what I want to visualize.
You need to understand the individuals who are going to read that information, and what are they going to do with that information, and what information do they need? What's the bare minimum that they need? Happy to pick that up as with you as another conversation, Yvonne. I can understand from your point of view it's quite hard.
I know.
That you're trying to work out, but I'm happy to pick that up with you as a separate conversation, because I kind of think I know where you're going with this, and I kind of think I know who it is you need to talk to. But I need you to think more around going and talking to those people directly, like asking them questions around who they are and what they want from working with you and working in this space, and what do they know, and really putting yourself in those shoes. You might find out that a conversation, back again to Mark's point, you might find out that a conversation is more than enough, that you don't even need to get into a point of putting it down on paper.
Oh, okay. So survey is not just enough for that. You need to have like something like a workshop. Is that
right? Look. When I'm going through product development and getting requirements from users, one of the products that I'm working on at the moment, I've got Facebook surveys out. I've got a Facebook group. I'm Zoom meeting with them every second day with different users in that system. I am going out and just watching these people while they're working, so they're tradies. I am then talking to people who talk to them on a regular basis and asking them, and just ask them the same stupid questions every single time. And you would be astounded. Like, why do you do that? How do you do that? When do you do that? What are you doing that for? And asking the exact same questions, and not assuming that I know everything, and letting that information come into me. I build a bigger picture around the whole systems of things. And if you don't spend enough time empathizing with the people that you're building for, the people that are inside the systems, and keep being vulnerable and keep asking questions and why, you'll make assumptions, and you'll put those assumptions behind you, and they will eventually come back to bite you in the butt.
Great input. Thank you.
Cool. Awesome. All right. Thanks, guys. That was an awesome workshop. I'm open to concepts to explore and go through this shotgun style again. Drop them in the comments or in Facebook or in LinkedIn, and I'll get one cracking in a couple of weeks. Thanks, guys. Hope you enjoyed.
Thanks, Zeke.
Appreciate it.